United Airlines.
They're deeply concerned, meaning that it has been hijacked and nothing has happened as yet, or don't we know yet?
Down.
It is down. Now, is that the one I wonder that went down in Pennsylvania, or that's a different one?
No, that's a different one. There was flight 93 that went down in Pittsburgh. It was a Newark to San Francisco flight. The most recent is a United Airlines flight 175, Boston to LA. That is the fourth plane. The two this morning at the World Trade Center, and of course the Pittsburgh one in Newark, and of course this recent one, United Airlines flight Boston to LA.
So we basically have two Uniteds and two American Airlines that have gone down or at least crashed into the World Trade Center. You know, you look at the banner, Brenda, at the bottom of your screen here, America Under Attack. Never did any of us think that that would in fact happen on our home soil.
Okay. Mayor Giuliani spoke with New York One just a short while ago. Let's listen in. Okay, and of course he was talking about the incidents this morning. Of course, he is one of the first ones to be immediately put into one of those areas where they can monitor everything that's going on. Here's Mayor Giuliani.
Get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It will also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the Urban Search and Rescue Team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible. And the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet. But right now, we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of if there is, in fact, some system being implemented, what that system is, and where people are being taken?
People are triaging. People are being taken to every area hospital possible, even virtually within minutes. I drove down right past St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could see them actually on the street ready to take people, and that was within minutes of the first airplane hitting the World Trade Center. So the hospitals are ready. We'll be moving them to all different area hospitals, triaging them. The main thing is having those streets open so that we can get people in and out of the southern part of Manhattan as quickly as possible so that we can move them to hospitals all over the city.
And Mayor Giuliani, we'll let you...
in place. They're doing it. We just need the cooperation of people in getting out of there.
We'll let you get back to the operations there, and we do appreciate you taking the time for us here.
But once again, the only thing to do now is to remain calm and try to assist in the rescue effort.
Thank you.
Now let's pray.
All of us.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
I think, Brenda, what the mayor just said there, and pray, is probably one of the more profound things that we ought to all do at this time with America Under Attack. We do have some more eyewitnesses as to what happened this morning. Let's take a look at that footage now.
After I got to the bridge, it happened like maybe 10 minutes after I got over the GW. And I'm like, man, it's crazy. I mean, everything looked calm.
And all of a sudden, I just kept driving, and I saw smoke of both buildings. Once I got on the turnpike, I saw everybody parking on the side, so I did the same. And I was just watching because for me it was like a tremendous nightmare. I called my mother and my wife, and I said, there's going to be a war. I bet you there's going to be a war. And then all of a sudden, I see a lot of smoke, but I saw so much smoke, I couldn't believe it. And the first building collapsed.
Wow, I live right over there, and right in Kearny over there, and I've
obviously these are people, front eyewitnesses who are on the Jersey side looking toward New York.
It's just incredible. We're sitting in the truck crying.
Incredible. Holy moly, incredible.
It's too much to see that the terrorists can have a control on this country. You know, it's a scary thing. We're only 15 minutes away from the city. You got to be, you know, afraid to go back in there for a time to come until things settle down, honestly.
Everybody's got cameras and driving like maniacs, and I think the whole world is petrified. I know I am.
There you go. I mean, eyewitnesses from the Jersey side looking over there. And in fact, this morning, Brenda, I was on the phone overlooking I was on the Jersey side overlooking the downtown Manhattan area. And I turned away for just a moment, heard an explosion, went back to the window, looked out, and I saw the initial black plume of smoke at the World Trade Center. And then I said to my wife when I was on the phone with her at that moment, I said, wow, there's been an explosion at the World Trade Center. I've got to go. I'm going to call the office.
Colin Powell is on his way back from Peru. President Bush, as we understand, may still be in Florida. His is perhaps the only aircraft that is allowed on U.S. territory right now. All airports shut down. Of course, the New York primaries were canceled today. We have Alan Marcus, our political analyst, here with us now. But first, let's listen to President Bush, more comments that he made this morning in Florida when he found out about the terrorist attacks.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
The president was talking to some children in Florida this morning, and then we are told that he was heading back to Washington. Whether he's left yet or not, we don't know. What we do know is that perhaps as many as 5 aircraft were used in these attacks in various parts. 2 certainly into the World Trade Center.
Both those American Airlines flights.
And 2 United planes are apparently down.
And that was number 93, Newark to San Francisco, and number 175, Boston to L.A.
And there may have been another aircraft, either a helicopter or something, into the Pentagon, which caused that explosion.
Right, we just don't know about that one as yet. But Alan Marcus says there could be as many as 8.
There are news reports, Brenda, that there are as many as 8 planes that may have taken place in these various attacks. There are reports that, in fact, one plane south of Pittsburgh was possibly headed for Camp David, and there's another plane near Camp David that is already down. There's been a car bombing reported at the State Department. The White House has been evacuated. America certainly is under attack. It's not just in New York. It goes down to the nation's capital as well.
You know, under attack, you suggested earlier when we were chatting, I'm sorry, Brenda,
That's okay.
This is the first time that attacks have been successful.
Well, if you look at the World Trade Center bombing of 10 years ago, that was a successful attack. But after that, in the early days of the Clinton administration, there were efforts to blow up monuments, tunnels, other infrastructure in New York that were thwarted by the FBI and I guess the Central
Right, Alan,
Intelligence
let me break in for a second. We just had some video here of the plane crash in Pennsylvania, but apparently that's not it there. We'll get back to that as soon as we can. So continue your thought, please.
And at that time, the Clinton administration was praised for its ability to pick up terrorists, to follow them, and to thwart those efforts. Now, however, we see where there have been very, very well organized terrorist attacks against the World Trade Center, against the nation's capital, and we appear not to have a clue as to the origin of these attacks or how much more we can anticipate.
All of us just trying to make some sense of this. You as an analyst, we as reporters and journalists, citizens of this country, we will be trying to analyze this to figure out why, what happened, and what can we do to prevent it again.
Well, we look at it this way. September 11th is the anniversary of the peace accords, the Israeli Arabic peace accords that were done at the White House under the Carter administration. There has been in the past the Black September movement, which hijacked planes and then blew them up in the middle of the Algerian desert. We have had car bombing attacks or truck bombing attacks on the World Trade Center, and now we have today. We have to recognize that we are no longer free of these kinds of attacks. This isn't like Pearl Harbor, where it was an imperial nation, a state where we could retaliate. These are people who are willing to give up their lives to make a point. We are being punished for something that is perceived. Possibly it's our support of Israel in the Middle East. Maybe it's other things. But we are without an enemy. So one of the things George Bush has to do right now is he has to regain the confidence of the American people. We have to look forward as a nation now and not be running off in many different directions. So as Ronald Reagan did after the Challenger disaster, he has to reassure the American people, he has to be a calming influence, and then he has to show that he's in command. Because right now there are a number of pundits around saying, would this have been tried if there had been a different president, if there hadn't been the disunity, if you will, political disunity in the United States, where control of the Senate changed, where there seems to be a lack of political direction at times, where we have been kind of at peace in the world and maybe we let our guard down just a bit. Think of it, 10 years ago, in the wake of the Gulf War, could 8 planes or 5 planes or how many planes it turns out to be have been hijacked on United States soil in one day?
We're going to now take a look at some tape that we have out of Pittsburgh. As we mentioned earlier, United Airlines had confirmed that 2 of their jets today were crashed. Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, Flight 175, Boston to L.A.
You know, Alan, when you talk about the political pundits each saying that looking for blame in some cases, and then you say we don't really have an imperial enemy to go after. What do we do? I mean, well, American people are going to demand something.
First, there's going to be the demand of how could this have happened? And then once we come to a conclusion of exactly what happened, there is going to be the retribution that has to be paid for. We remember the embassy bombings that took place a few years ago. President Clinton quickly responded to that. In fact, on the day after his appearance before a grand jury. Some would question whether or not that was motivated, in fact, by his weakened political stand-in. Brenda and I did a broadcast that night on that.
But Alan, when you talk about the kind of fear and grief that has gripped the nation within 3 hours in one day, the kind of fear and grief that we're going to be going through, not just within these 3 hours, not just the rest of today, but every time we look at our skyline and it's not there anymore.
Well, it's not there, and we always remember we woke up this morning safe and secure. And now it's midday, nobody's going to lunch, nobody's safe, and nobody feels secure. America has undergone a metamorphosis, a change, and it'll never change back.
And to cut out television, to cut out television in this area, people from all over the country trying to contact each other, cell phone use, things we just took for granted.
Well, I've received many panic calls today from people saying, well, we just want to make sure you weren't at the World Trade Center, because that's the hub of business in the United States, and those of us here in the East, we spend a lot of time downtown. And my daughter called from Scottsdale, Arizona, in fact. My 5-year-old granddaughter called. She was worried watching it on television, I guess, as she was ready to go to school. And she remembered Pop took me there. Mm-hmm. And so there is that kind of worry that grips the country right now. I don't think there's any work being done in any offices. People are either in prayer, they're in awe as they sit in front of televisions, or they're just saying, what next? That's what you hear a lot of, Rowan and Brenda. What's next?
Well, that's certainly the president's decision as to how he places this attack and how his administration deals with it.
Well, he has to immediately get the confidence of the American people. He has to take command. He has to be in charge. We don't know where he is right now. We're presuming that Air Force One, as Brenda indicated, is probably the only plane that can fly over American soil right now, except for the F-16s that seem to be patrolling the skies over Washington and New York. We think we saw them from our windows. We're a little east of you, flying around.
And of course, you're afraid now every time you look up and do see any kind of aircraft.
We have people in our office that are just staring at the Empire State Building, wondering if it's next. I mean, that's what's taken over this country, the fear that grips right now. We have not had this kind of a direct frontal assault on our nation's capital probably since the British sacked Washington in 1812. It's been a long time.
Probably not.
And just to recap for just a moment, 8:45, the first plane hits the World Trade Center. Within 15 minutes, another plane goes into, as we saw in those earlier pictures, the World Trade Center. Then the Pentagon. Also, we don't know if that was a plane, but it's some kind of explosion at the Pentagon.
There are reports of a number of deaths, Brenda, that I heard on my way over, that there was a tail section spotted of what appeared to be an airliner in the wreckage at the Pentagon.
Correct.
Yet unconfirmed, I believe, but a number of deaths. The question is, with the loss of life at the Pentagon, depending on where that loss of life took place, is that our retaliatory staff that is no longer able to function? You know, where is our Congress? Where are our federal leaders? You know, who's in command here? Those are the questions that George Bush has to respond to right away, because this country has always looked to its leaders on a nonpartisan basis for leadership during these times of crisis.
Well, the Capitol was evacuated. The Senate House and office buildings were evacuated. Most of the major monuments were closed down. There is a plan, as you well know, in Washington, when something like this happens, that all of the federal officials who are needed in times of crisis are protected.
That's right. And they are not in the same place for fear that, as an example, when the president gives his State of the Union address, there's always one member of the cabinet who is left outside of the Capitol in case of a disaster of this type. So our form of government can continue.
Of course, we're always training for it. We always hear and see about the training exercises. We always think we are prepared for anything. Why do you think no one will seem to be prepared for this?
Because we've gotten lax. You know, I grew up in the 50s and into the 60s, always presuming that there would be an atomic bomb dropped someplace on America. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen. We then went through a period of very aggressive terrorism. Probably capped by the World Trade Center bombing just in 93. In February 26th was my birthday of 93. And we've been
Alan, let me interrupt you for a quick second. There's moments ago, Senator Edward Kennedy and the First Lady Laura Bush spoke, and we have that video now for you.
Good morning. All of us deplore the acts of terrorism that we have seen in these past minutes, and our hearts reach out to all of those who have suffered, lost their lives, and are injured right now, and all of us reach out as Americans to the brave rescue workers that are attempting to help our fellow citizens. We, out of respect for those efforts, have postponed our hearing this morning. We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in another area of public policy. We're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country, and because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments. And we will look forward to an early reappearance by the First Lady for this committee on the subject of early education. And Mrs. Bush, we recognize now.
You heard from the President this morning, and Senator Kennedy and Senator Gregg and I both join his statement in saying that our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now. Thank you.
You know, children are kind of struck by all this. Is there a message you could tell to the nation?
Well, parents need to reassure their children everywhere in our country that they're safe. Thank you.
All right, that's First Lady Laura Bush and Senator Ted Kennedy addressing basically the nation to try to reassure as it begin that process. Frank Uciardi, Brundo, is on the phone now in Lower Manhattan. Frank?
Yeah, Roland, things are extremely, as you imagine, tense and critical down here. We're at the corner of Park Place and Church Street. And just moments ago, as we got down here by Ground Zero, we looked up, which you could no longer see the World Trade Center towers from our perspective. There was nothing but skylight up there. It was a frightening, horrible scene. Police cars on fire, civilian cars on fire at the base there. And I was down there with a civilian by the name of Charles Romeo, who lives on Pearl Street. He's been our camera person down here, and as we were down there shooting the scene, we were attacked by the police officers who grabbed him and his camera and threw him up against the wall. Charles?
That's what happened. You know, we were trying to take some pictures of the scene. We were safe and taking some shots, and they were very upset that we were there, and they confiscated the camera.
And also the firefighters who were there tried to dig stuff out of the rubble. They looked at us as if we were the enemy. They were shouting at us. They were threatening us with their axes, telling us that we had no place being there. But clearly the horror of the situation, people are not reacting the way they normally would. The tempers are extremely tight here. And they're just trying to get a grasp on what is before them, which is really just desolation down here. It looks like a white moonscape strewn with papers on the street, smoking cars in the distance. And again, you look up back to where you thought the World Trade Center towers were, and you can no longer see them.
Frank, such an incredible scene. How are you right now? What is it like being there, seeing this, and being a part of this tragedy?
It is a bit surreal. I thought after TWA 800 that I had seen and experienced just about everything. This is just one of the firefighters was screaming at us. Don't you understand? There's thousands of people that may be trapped or dead inside the building, referring to the World Trade Center towers. And of course, as you realize, just a little while ago, they evacuated the Corporation Council from number 7 World Trade Center, which was the bunker where these people go for the emergency management programs. In fact, I'm being asked by a member of the Bomb Squad, I understand, to use this phone because their cell phones are not working very well down here, and the Bomb Squad is asking to use the street phone. We're going to get off the line so he can make an emergency call.
Frank, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Cell phones all over the city are jammed because people are trying to find out what's happening to their loved ones.
And as Barbara mentioned earlier, they just cut off the service except for emergency use.
Governor Pataki has called out the National Guard, obviously to secure property and also to help, I imagine, in the rescue and recovery efforts.
Barbara Nevins-Taylor is now on the phone to update us on what she sees.
Brenda and Roland, police officers who are coming north from the scene are incredibly worried about their colleagues who were on the emergency response squad. The command bunker for the emergency response squad was in the World Trade Towers, and they think that as they assembled this morning to respond, many of the elite squad may have been killed.
I'm sorry, Barbara, could you please just recap that, because it's very important. Members of the elite response squad...
Well, we don't know this for a fact, but this is a concern for police department on the ground. Right now, there is a lot of confusion, and I certainly don't want to add to it, but we must understand, if you remember from the Y2K planning, the mayor's emergency bunker was in the World Trade Towers, and that's where the emergency response team is headquartered. That's where the command post is. So the first team that was assembled to respond to the first plane attack was in the World Trade Tower. And now the police officers who are on the street are concerned about the well-being and the safety of those elite officers who are trained to respond in a situation like this. But there is such widespread concern about everyone who is in the building, not only about these police officers, but about relatives or friends who might have been in the building, near the police officers or any place in the building. I'm here with a woman who is trying to locate her husband, who was on the 65th floor. He went to work in a bank this morning and went up to the 65th floor. She knew, and she was afraid that he might not have gotten out.
Barbara, thank you so much.
You know, Barbara, we'll be getting back to you, certainly. We have Dave Barker, who is also in Lower Manhattan. Dave is one of our reporters here at UPN 9. And Dave, what's your assessment of the situation at the moment? Dave Barker, we've established contact with you now in Lower Manhattan. What is your assessment of the situation now?
We're only about 6 blocks from the point of the explosion.
And in front of me, I know you've heard this from everyone this morning, but words just don't adequately describe what I'm watching right now. Just this thick, black, intense, boiling cloud of ash enveloping this area of Manhattan. All around me, there are people just in utter disbelief. The only sounds here, just a cacophony of ambulances, police, and emergencies crews screaming to the scene here. In the air here, just a constant dusting of ash all over this for miles here in this area of Manhattan. Almost looks like a light dusting of snow. And again, on the faces of everyone, just disbelief. I spoke with one NYPD officer just a few moments ago, and he said he saw the Twin Towers go up, and then this morning he watched them come down, and then he just choked up. There were no more words. At every major intersection here, people in large groups are just sitting here in disbelief, listening to radios, trying to get the latest words and trying to make some sense out of what they see with their eyes right in front of them. Again, the ash covers every street in this area, every car. I spoke with a news crew earlier who was in there for the second blast and was lucky to get out with their life. And again, they weren't talking. It was almost as if they were in shock. Right now, everything south of Duane Street, no one is allowed in. That even includes our crews at this point. They're just worried about. They said there's more explosions going on as we speak. There's talk of gas leaks on the west side, possibly near the Chelsea Pier areas. There's just everything at this point is unsettled.
Dave Barker in Lower Manhattan. Thank you so much, Dave. Earlier we saw people parading around with smiles on their faces in one part of the country. PLO leader Yasser Arafat has issued a second statement, and I guess this comes after there was some joy, even though he was expressing sadness.
And we have that video now.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked.
Of course, he was not reacting after we had seen earlier shots of the people actually celebrating.
What you're referring to is on the West Bank and elsewhere in the Middle East, some of the Palestinian children as well as adults, women, were handing out candy in the streets, celebrating the fact that there wasn't a successful attack on America, both the Pentagon, at the Pentagon and also at the World Trade Center. What we're looking at now, Brenda, is the evacuation at the White House, purely as a precautionary measure. But certainly if you have an aircraft the size of a 767, I think it was, that hit the Pentagon, at least that's the presumption at the moment, guided into that as a suicide plane, then you would take precautions and evacuate all of the major federal buildings in Washington.
And of course, when it comes to those airlines, just to recap for you, American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to LA, crashed into the World Trade Center. The plane was carrying 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. Then the American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles Airport near Washington to Los Angeles, crashed into the World Trade Center. That plane was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. And then 2 flights from United Airlines. Flight number 93, a Boeing 757, crashed southeast of Pittsburgh from Newark to San Francisco. The plane was carrying 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. And the last one, United Airlines Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles, carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots, and 7 flight attendants. And we're seeing scenes right now.
The text now of the statement issued by American Airlines reads that American Airlines confirmed that it has lost 2 aircraft in tragic accidents this morning. American said the flights were, as you just reported, Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to LA with 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. And Flight 77, a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to LA with 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. They went on to say that because of the heightened security, due to the nature of today's events, American said it is working closely with the U.S. government authorities and will not release more information at this time.
And of course, the government has shut down the entire traffic system. And American Airlines, by the way, has given this phone number for information if you have loved ones or need information. Please call 1-800-245-0999. We would understandably think that no one who just needs flight information will be calling that number, but this is just for people who may have lost relatives, who need more information about concerned loved ones. 1-800-245-0999 from American Airlines.
You know, also, Brenda, just as a quick thing to let people know, all major baseball games have been canceled throughout America today. Joining us in our studio is Tom Phelan.